Hi, my name's Phil.
My name is Rob.
And we've been mates for years. We've done loads of stuff together.
All of which, mainly, have turned into chaos.
But someone then suggested, why don't you do a podcast? That seemed like a good idea, didn't it?
Really did.
Then we realised neither of us have ever done one of those. So is this going to work?
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
Welcome to Two Pastors in a Pod.
So
here we are again.
So it's another podcast, and we're on our own, which is great. So good.
No, and we've branched out today, haven't we?
We have definitely branched
We
out.
have moved into Cheshire.
The posh bit.
Cheshire, and we have a very posh Cheshireite here, don't we?
I've not said anything yet because this is the fourth take.
Listen, people think that we do this just straight off without even,
No, it just
comes
no
naturally.
practice. It does. Okay. Yes.
Joe, welcome. Thank you, because we're in your home. So thank you for letting us come.
Pleasure.
And so tell us a little bit about yourself. Who you are, what your background is, that kind of stuff.
Who am I? I'm the son of my mum and my dad.
Good, yes, always a good start.
Brother to my sister. So I grew up in Stockport. My parents moved when there was such a thing as a YTS, which is the youth training scheme, and I got
Can I just pause you there a minute? So, right, we are now being inclusive. Do you know why?
Why?
Because he's not a Scouser.
He's not a Scouser.
He's not a Scouser, and he's
not from Yorkshire.
He's actually nearer to Manchester than he is to Liverpool.
See, well, this podcast is about including everybody, wherever they're from.
Jay, you are more than welcome of being a near man.
Great.
Anyway, continue.
Yes.
I'm thrilled that you stopped me in my flow.
Well, you're going to get used to that because that's going to happen a lot in this podcast. Come, carry on.
I'll start squeezing your leg if I feel like it.
Well,
You wouldn't be the first.
Let's not go there.
So your YTS, what was your YTS?
Yeah. So it's a youth training scheme that the government introduced to try and get young kids into employment, and it paid, I think, 25 quid a week, which was actually not bad in its day. But when my parents moved from Stockport to Cheshire, I had no choice but to go with them.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'd stayed there because I loved the town, I loved the sort of city life. And I spent most of my time then when I passed my driving test, going back, coming here, going back, coming here. Anyway, subsequently, I've kind of become entrenched or ingrained in Cheshire, and here I am now.
Can I go next?
You go next.
You're involved in a church in Cheshire?
No.
This is just so you know, this is a Christian podcast.
Okay. So that was an error on my part. Yes, we go to Grace Church in Sandbach,
Yep.
which is a church plant from Wheelock Heath Baptist Church. They had the vision many years ago to plant a couple of churches. Sandbach is the first one. As it is at the moment, we meet in Sandbach Girls' School. We would ideally like premises of our own, but that's been something that's been difficult to find, especially something big enough, something that's developable and within a reasonable cost. To be fair, the cost hasn't even been the hurdle yet, it's always been finding the building.
Yeah, just getting the right place. So it's great you're here. We're going to talk a little bit about what you do in terms of Christian ministry. But one of the questions we've asked a lot of our guests is that when you were a kid, were you a good lad? Or were you one of these bad ones? See, the problem is you've got me and Rob.
Yeah.
You've got Angel Face, as always. And then you've got Rob, who wasn't.
Yeah.
So what were you like as a kid, as a teenager? Were you...
Well, I think the technical phrase for Rob would be a scally.
Ooh.
But
You can tell I know Jay, can't you?
I probably thought I was a good kid.
Yeah.
As most people think they're intrinsically good, but we all know that we're not actually good people, and depending what you measure yourself against.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm sure there were worse, and I'm sure there were better.
But you were definitely a scout.
No, I was all right. I do remember there's someone had graffitied the name Jay on some steps in Stockport, and these great big nice palatial sort of steps. And my mother was adamant it was me, so I got a beating and a reprimanding for it. Whereas actually,
It wasn't.
No, I mean, there's not one Jay in the whole of Manchester and Stockport.
I mean, Rob probably should apologise for that all the time. So the other thing we do, and if you've been a regular watcher of this podcast, you will know that every week we have to have a brew. Now,
Yes.
you are very privileged.
This is special.
So this brew is the most expensive brew that we've had.
Because you've been on holiday, haven't you?
keep rolling. I'll be back with 3 clean cups.
Oh, okay. So we've lost our guest. That's not a podcast recently, but 3 cups are coming. So this is the most expensive brew from Norway. The most expensive brew and probably the most unusual of all the brews that we've had. Now the idea, Jay. Oh look, we've got the posh stuff now, haven't we?
Very
Wow. So the idea is that we get to drink the brew, taste it, smell it, decide what's in it, and then we have to make a decision on between 1 and 10. 10 being it's the best thing you've ever tasted, 1 being put it back in the cupboard, we don't want any more.
I have to say, you hold it up to the camera. This is the closest to a sample-looking cup of tea that we've ever had.
Well, we'll have
It
to
looks
wait
like
and see.
something you take to the doctors.
Well, hopefully it doesn't taste quite like that, but we'll have a look. I'll be mum because I normally am.
There you are.
Now you can have this with milk. It does look a little bit weak, although these tea bags, as I say.
Jay's wife prepared this for us, isn't she?
Well, sort of, yeah, she put the water in it anyway. The trouble is, the tea bags are so expensive that they obviously didn't put a huge amount of whatever's in it. So, if you can guess what's in this, I will be super impressed. So, have a sniff.
So you're gonna do the whole like wine tasting?
Yeah.
I have
You don't
seen-
spit it out, though.
The thing that concerns me with this is
Yeah.
I have quite an unsophisticated palate.
Well, it goes with the rest of you, really, doesn't it?
So, come on,
You
have a
put
sniff.
yourself up for that one, didn't you?
So have a sniff.
Using something like this, my wife would normally go and she, oh yeah, I get the walnuts, I get the honey, I get this, I get
Yeah.
that. And I just go, I like that. Or
Well, okay, just have a taste, see what you think.
Well, I don't know.
Let it rest a bit.
There's a little bit of sweetness in there.
So what do you think's in it? I know what I thought when I first smelt it. I thought it was minty, but it's not. It hasn't got mint in it.
Norwegian berries.
No. Keep having a taste. It's not bad.
Honey.
Nope.
Anytime you like, Jay. You know, you are part of this.
What do you reckon?
I actually got notes of things that I could taste them, but I can't identify what they are, which is why I'm doing the thinking. But actually,
Okay. What do you think? Is it nice?
it is, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's all right, actually. It's not bad.
It's better than that Red Bush stuff we tried the other week.
Oh, right, that's horrendous.
Yeah, that is bad. That got quite a low mark. So, what do you think's in it? Guess.
Well, give me honey.
You give me honey.
Lavender.
No.
I always say honey and lavender. You can't check the label.
You can't check the label. That's cheating.
It isn't cheating, it's using the opportunities that are around
And
you.
it doesn't tell you on
No,
there,
it
does it?
doesn't, no.
This is black tea, as per usual, and sweet chili. This is sweet chili tea.
Sweet chili.
Sweet chili
Right.
tea.
I'm not getting the chilies here.
Yeah, there's definitely some in here, but it's sweet chili. I like it. I think it's a great thing.
Oh, it's not actually. Oh, we haven't done the scores.
No, we're doing scores on the doors. What do you
Out
reckon?
of 10. Go on, Jay.
It's an 8.
Oh, it's an 8.
9, it's a 9.
That's a 9.
Well, you need to go to Norway and buy something.
Yeah, that is. I've never seen it over here, I must admit. I'll show you the box at the end.
I'd say 7. I always go for.
I've got to be honest.
Nothing's really hit the 9, 10 yet for me.
I thought the caramel one.
Well, that was
with
nice.
grits, I would stick that probably at 7 or an 8 because I actually quite like that.
No, I do.
So that's quite a nice tea. So at least we've done that bit, which is great. Don't forget you can send us new tea. Any suggestions? We're always up. Maybe you make your own tea.
Phil would like you to send in free teas because it obviously broke the bank to go all the way to
tell you,
Norway just to
it
buy
did.
just to buy a few tea leaves.
Very
But there you
expensive
go.
tea leaves.
Legitimate business.
I'd have just gone to Aldi, but no, you have to
You
go
would
to,
have.
you have to go to
Yeah,
Norway.
there are other supermarkets out there as well. So now we've done the introduction, you've done the brew, we know what things. Jay, what do you do? What are you involved with when it comes to church life, Christians, and oh, hello.
Do you know what? We've got homemade biscuits.
Okay, we'll have one of those as well over here. What are you involved with? What kind of is the
answered.
biscuits?
Refreshments.
Refreshments. That's a great ministry. What else do you do?
Mainly refreshments. Stuff, yeah. No, I do volunteer to do some work with CAP, which is Christians Against Poverty.
Okay. So what does that look like in kind of ethos and terms with regard to poverty?
So I think obviously it's difficult to measure in certain parts of the country with relatively affluent areas. So Chester, for example,
Yep.
we don't have a lot of people who either will admit they're struggling or are struggling. So depending how you define poverty, is it literally you don't have shelter, food, essentials that you need to survive, or are you just struggling to be able to pay the bills that you have, which equally will feel as as distressing, I'm sure.
So what's your experience been of the people that you've worked alongside here in Chester? Because you've been doing this a few years now, haven't you? So you've come across a number of different situations. I don't know whether you can comment on the types of people who use Christians Against Poverty and the kind of thing that you do with them.
So the norm would be, I imagine, your sort of normal family or your single parents who are looking for a tool to be able to help them manage their money better. And in a lot of cases it is managing it from a budgeting point of view, and that's really where the small course, the Christians Against Poverty, and the money coaches offer. It's helping people look at what they do with their income, how much income they've got, whether they can improve that income in any way, and then what they do with regard to spending and facilitating it. We do get some people who are literally struggling week by week, month by month, and if you actually do something about it with the course, I genuinely believe you will have a benefit. There's an old phrase, isn't there? There's something along the lines of, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
Yeah.
So if you come along to the course, sit there for 3 weeks, or three single evenings for 3 weeks, and go back and do nothing differently, nothing will change. But if you use the tools that CAP supply, whether it be the online budgeting worksheets or something as simple as this that you can print off their website,
Right.
and it allows you just to enter some of the things, because some of it isn't about how much you spend on a week or a month. Some of it can be things that you need to plan for. So Christmases, birthdays, holidays, washing machine breakdowns, car servicing, car tax, MOTs, that we don't build into a short-term budget.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we've got a new government, and you know, they brought out some figures this week with regard to child poverty, and what's the difference between poverty as we hear it and relative poverty? Because those are things that are bandied around, and maybe some of us just don't understand the difference between the two.
So the measurement of relative poverty is within taking the median, which is not the average, but it's the middle point of what people's income is, including house expenses, and then within 60% of that, anything under that is relative poverty.
Okay. So in your experience, obviously, you know, many of us have lived in cities, we may now live in rural areas. Do you think that relative poverty only affects one part of society, or do you find within the ministry you've got that affects a lot of different parts of society?
We only see generally a particular part, but I know full well it affects all kinds.
Right.
To the point where, you know, I've had conversations with people, generally once removed, but people who've got, you know, great big fancy houses, but are in debt to the point where they can't afford to keep it. And sometimes it's just because the cost of the house is just so expensive, their income has changed, their circumstances have changed, there was 2 incomes and now there's only 1. Yeah, but from the outside you can look in and go, you know, if those people have got it made, they have it easy, I wish that I had that.
Yeah.
When if you're on the inside of the hedge, you find that actually it's
very different.
and they'd like to be on the outside of it.
I mean, you've had a lot of experience in Liverpool working in the church you worked in.
Well, yeah, the previous church that I worked in was in a particularly poor area of Liverpool. I was a governor at a school there, and the vast majority of the kids there were on free school meals. You'd go into the schools, and the teachers were really concerned about what would happen during the holidays, because some of these kids, their only meal that they really got was the meal that they got in school. So whether they came to the breakfast club and had the lunchtime meal, that was really the only nourishment. The rest of the time is what mum or usually single parent families could do for the kids. So I did experience quite a bit of poverty, and there was also, you know, issues around school clothing as well. You know, we had a uniform bank, and it's still going at the Bethel Church in Liverpool to help out families who just couldn't afford the uniform. And the thing that we used to help with is food during the holidays. Because these kids come in and they get fed in the week when they're in school. But in the holiday season, for instance, you know, parents were single parents often, as I say, were very concerned about how they could feed their kids for a whole host of different reasons. You know, and the reasons their finances were in a really bad state for it could vary, couldn't it? But the fact is, these kids didn't have anything, and also bedding as well. Some of these kids didn't have a bed, and there's charities out there now who supply beds for kids because they haven't got a bed to sleep on. You know, a lot of them are just sofa surfing, which in our day and age, in our country, you think, how's that going on? But the fact is, it does happen.
But that opens up the whole question of, if you look at the subsidies the government are putting into benefits, into school clubs, into reducing food, Tesco's and some of the other big stores, free food as you walk in for kids. Is there a deeper fundamental issue within our society that brings in this poverty area?
I don't know what you think. I've got an opinion.
I do think that one of the biggest problems is schools don't teach how to manage money. You don't teach people what the implications will be when you leave school, or even when you go to university. You know, you go and live in a HMO, a house of multiple occupation. You've got equal bills, you've got responsibilities, you know, and the way you spend your money is very impactful by the end of the year.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was a kid in London.
Can you remember that far back?
Yeah, they knocked it down since then, funnily enough. But they used to bring in, when we got to our final year, we had a careers week and stuff, but also they brought in a mobile bank. And we spent half a day, every kid in the school, learning about money, how that works. It does appear, though, that society has shifted where, well, yeah, we want you to get a job, but if you can't get a job, it'll be fine.
But I think also that the breakdown of family structures as well hasn't helped. So a lot of these people are on their own. And for whatever reason, there is no input from family members, relational issues are rife, aren't they? And often the kids suffer, but also not just the kids. You know, again, work with homeless people in Liverpool, and some of the horror stories that you hear that affect these people mentally and physically, and the level of abuse just takes them well under the poverty line, because mentally they can't cope with life. And again, we had Jane on, didn't we, about mental health, and often you'll find that those who are suffering from severe mental health problems, financially, they're very insecure as well. So there's a whole host of reasons why people are on the poverty line, or even up below the poverty line.
But I mean, would you say
levels of poverty?
Yeah, I mean, would you say, Jay, compared to the 1940s, 1950s, are we addressing poverty more in this country now than at any other time?
No, well, I don't think so. And if you look back at some videos which you'll find on YouTube with documentaries from 1960 in Nottingham and what poverty was like for people then, and there's videos of a lady who works endlessly sorting out lace things, and she's ending up with a few shillings at the end of the week, and her husband's earning £12 and taking 11 home after.
But that was before the introduction of the welfare system.
1960, was it?
1963, I think, was the start of the welfare system as we know it today. So we have addressed that in some ways. So that's why I asked the question about a fundamental. Someone once described poverty as the black hole that sucks the humanity space. The humanity sucked into that space of poverty. I mean, Jesus said we are always going to have the poor with us.
Certainly.
So how do we address that as Christians? Obviously, Christians Against Poverty is a really good route. How many people do you think that organisation on its own is able to help a year?
I think since 2010 they've made 20,000 plus people debt free. So people who were in debt were struggling just to meet that.
Do you know how many of those fall back into debt?
No.
Right, so we don't know but at least that 20,000 have been helped.
And all those 20,000 people though have done it themselves. You know, it's not something where somebody's done a fix for them and paid something off for them. They've been taught how to manage their money, how to pay off those things. Granted, there may be IVAs and other things they've been involved with, but essentially those people now manage money differently. And I would be surprised if many, if any, are back in that situation.
I mean, Proverbs got a lot of advice on stuff like that. One of the Proverbs that I came across was Proverbs in 28 verse 27 says this: those who give to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to them will receive many curses. I mean, that's a fairly hefty thing for us as Christians.
And then you got John, who I've written one down here from 1 John. He wrote this: if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? And then we have the story of the Good Samaritan. The greatest commandment of all was to love God with all your heart and soul, etc. And then the second was this, is to love your neighbour as yourself. And then the whole parable then that Jesus deals with in Luke chapter 10 speaks of who is the neighbour and how are you to act and help your neighbour. Like the Good Samaritan, he put his hand in his pocket, he dressed the wounds, he spent time with this individual, and he didn't know him from, as we say at Liverpool, from Adam, did he? And yet he helped. See, Christians down through the decades, if not centuries, have always had an eye towards the poor and helping.
And I think that helps the thing, isn't it?
Just following on with that, I think we've got to say something very similar. Is quite often people go, "Oh, well, I've given some money to that charity, I've given that money to person," and it's not the money that fixes it. It's time, it's support.
Yeah.
It's sometimes, in this case, it might be education, and that's often for us the hardest thing to give.
I think that's really important because the Charities Foundation 2023 in their annual report says that we as citizens of the UK gave a staggering £13.9 billion to charities. That's a huge amount of money to be giving to charities. I mean, there's always the cynic who says, well, how much of that charity money goes? And again, figures from that suggest that charities will spend between 26 and 70% of that on the actual projects, and the rest will go into admin. But it isn't just about the money, is it?
No.
That's clearly what Christians Against Poverty kind of work towards, in changing attitudes and people's perspectives.
And building relationships.
Yes, that's key, isn't it? Just getting alongside people and understanding where they're at, and having the tools to be able to help them. I mean, financially, I think sometimes CAP do give. They have a fund, don't they? But that's probably not the norm, is it?
First level would be the coaching.
It's advice, isn't
and
it?
helping people manage it themselves. And if people are in a particular level of debt, then there are a second tier that will help maybe consolidate that with you, maybe look at ways of being able to deal with that and take it to the next level. But those two are the sort of the front line. So especially the ones where people will come and spend an evening doing the course, constructing the budget, and it's such a powerful thing to do. People who think they're quite competent with money and quite reasonably well off, if we can persuade them to do a budget, it's quite surprising sometimes how out of touch we can be. So Sally and I did one quite a while ago, and I said, "So how much is our internet, our Sky TV, or whatever?" She said, "Well, what do you think it is?" £5. I exaggerate to make the point, but you can be so out of touch unless you actually do scrutinise your bank statements.
I mean, what can we do as churches? So, to be fair, Rob knows more about finance than I am. Shocking with finance.
Well, not much better, to be
But
honest.
but my missus does all that stuff because she knows. She just understands it. I can't get my head around it. How can we, as churches, how can we, as individual Christians, the Bible's quite clear. Don't turn you away from those in need. How can we address that without falling into the trap that a lot of churches and a lot of individual Christians have done, where, to be honest, they're taken for a ride? How can we do that? What should our approach be?
Discernment's a very special gift, isn't it? And so I suppose initially praying for discernment and for wisdom with the things that we do and the people that we talk to, because we can go out this afternoon and find somebody to help. But I think very often if we can find people who come to us for help, or people that are even coming close by, that we can.
Am I right in thinking though, in order for the person in need to come to a church, that church has to be engaged within its own community at first.
Yeah.
If it's got a good relationship within its own community, be that a city, a town, or a village,
Yeah.
then that should encourage those who are particularly in need to come in our direction. But what about in the broader congregation in terms of giving to? Is it better for us to give to an organisation such as churches to give to an organisation such as Christians Against Poverty, rather than try and take on issues ourselves? How would you advise us?
So again, I think it depends on the particular individual and the circumstance, and I can't give you advice on that. Much like being a money coach, we can't give advice, we can only help steer people. But I completely believe that what CAP does is a great charity to give money to, and I don't believe they squander it like certain charities get accused of. they have a main goal of helping people get debt free.
Yeah.
If there is somebody in your personal circle or somebody who comes to you and you can help them, absolutely, I completely agree with doing so. But I think sometimes you just need to be wise and careful about what is the right answer to that.
I think you've got to know your community.
Yeah.
Because every community has different needs, and you know you've got some relatively wealthy communities, and you've got people like where I lived in Liverpool, predominantly whatever the definition of poverty is, but they were poorer people. So you have to know that, you have to know the demographic, and you have to reach into that. Discerning the best way to do that. I mean, we had a policy at my previous church of not giving money out.
Yeah, we had the same policy.
Because a number of folk would come in and they would ask for money, but we would feed them.
Yeah.
We would give them whatever we've got in the kitchen, etc., etc. We'd offer advice to them as well, but we would have a policy of not giving money. But then again, it's about discernment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you see an individual who has a need and the Holy Spirit is convicting you to help that individual, then you've got to go with how the Holy Spirit is prompting.
I mean, in the two churches that I was pastor of, we had the same policy. We didn't give money, but what we did, we built a relationship with one of the local cafe owners, and we paid the cafe owner. That acts two ways. It helps a local business, but it also gives us a really good way to be able to help those in their times of need and sorting out their future.
Yeah.
If there were people who wanted to get in touch with Christians Against Poverty, are they all around the country in different blocks, or where do they go?
Yes. So it's not evenly spaced, but if you go to the CAP website, as the Christians Against Poverty website, first of all, there's lots of tools on there that people can use to be able to just give them advice, whether it be the budgeting tools, but you can go on.
It's all free?
Yes, it is also, yeah. Pop your postcode in there and it will tell you if there's somewhere local that will help you and somewhere that's running a course.
Well, what we'll try and do, we'll try and put on the website for Christians Against Poverty at the end of our podcast.
Yeah.
So for you, how long have you been doing this? Jay?
3, 4, 5 years, something like that, not sure.
And so...
You asked me how old I was before and I couldn't remember that, so...
Yeah, you have to ask your wife.
You're obviously at a certain age now, aren't you? Almost adults in.
Behave. So in those years, have you seen, obviously that would have been through COVID years.
Yes, so we did. I think we tried to do them online, like most people would with the Zooms. Then.
And have you seen a change in the needs?
Post-COVID?
I don't know. I think actually it's quite similar for the people we have. I think one of the difficulties we have is where our church is based is affluent middle class Cheshire, and there's two elements to that. Firstly, not everybody needs the help, and quite a lot of people I think struggle with the pride of going, I need some help.
Yeah.
And actually, even if you don't need some help, there's some good stewardship to be learned from it. Good ways to improve how much money you've got. To a degree, following this process, I think, gives you a pay rise.
Right. So there's definitely a way to do that. What about if we've got folk who are watching this podcast, do you think, I'm retired, I've come from a banking or a finance background, I'd love to get involved in trying to help people via CAP. I mean, what should they do?
So if you're a member of a local church, firstly see if there's any within your local area that are doing something along that lines. You can contact CAP to see if you can then become a CAP church. And actually, to be fair, even if you have retired from or haven't retired from banking or something, and you just have some spare time, it doesn't need a lot of skill. The instructions are all in the pack. The videos for the evenings, it's quite easy to be able to present and follow it. So it doesn't need anybody with a particular skill set. And the only person that is exempt from it is him. All of you.
I've got one final question for you, Jay. Stress and money. I mean, I think all of us at some stage in our lives have got anxious about the bank balance and the future. How bad is it? What are the stress levels of these people who come into you? Do you get to have that conversation with them? Because I can imagine if you can't make ends meet and the budget isn't balancing and your home is threatened, that can be quite stressful. I think I read on the CAP website that lots of people actually do contemplate suicide.
Yeah, it's a really high percentage. So from my experience, I have fortunately only come across people who are maybe just struggling day to day to make ends meet. We haven't had a lot of people who are really, really difficult in difficult situations. And I think in certain areas you'll find more people in that particular dynamic. I think it's always really rewarding just to see people feeling like they've come away with a better understanding. It's like seeing a burden lifted for some people. They've not fixed it, they're not out of the maze yet, but they are able to go away knowing that they can make it.
They can genuinely see a
And
light.
they also know that people care. They're not on their own. There are people out there who help, which is what the church should be, isn't it? You know, we should encourage people to come and share their problems with us, and as best we can, with the resources that we got, we should be giving of ourselves to help them, shouldn't we?
And if I can just go back and touch on a couple of things with the CAP process, because they've changed it because the way people spend money is different now. So when we were young, you had a wallet full of coins and notes or whatever, and we now go to plastic. So if you go to a Costa or something now and buy a coffee, I could probably stop you 100 yards down the road and ask you how much that was, and you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Whereas if you handed a fiver over,
Yeah,
got
yeah.
your 30 change, you know.
Cash is king.
And what it's done is it's made it really difficult for people to be able to manage, because there's no emotional transaction when they buy something, so they almost don't feel like they've spent money. Now, I've had it many a time, and I'm still probably the same. If I had a note in my pocket, £10 note, and I fancied a drink, and it was a 50p can of Coke back in the day, then I wouldn't have a drink because I don't want to break that £10 note.
Yeah.
But when I just tap my watch or tap my phone and tap my plastic,
It's a big difference.
absolutely. And it's habits. You know, people quite easily will spend that money when there's a trigger, because they're bored, they're waiting, they're thirsty.
It's interesting because when Rob was young, you used to be able to get a drink, take the bottle back, and get a shilling back for it. Yeah. Oh, 10p.
Corona.
So Corona. Jay, it's been great to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast, talking about Christians Against Poverty. If you've got some questions you want to ask, then follow the email on the bottom of Two Pastors in a Pod. We'll happily pass those on or try and help you. Keep in touch with us. Tell us what you're thinking. Give us some subject matters that maybe you're concerned about. It's been brilliant to have you. Hopefully folk will be in touch with you. And we will be back. You can follow us.
Yes.
Where can you find us?
On the internet.
Do you know, I do wonder sometimes.
I don't know, all that list of stuff that goes out with the
YouTube, Spotify.
It's all underneath, isn't it? So you'll find us. If you want to find us, you'll find us.
So it's been great for you to join us. Jay, thanks again.
Thank you, Jay.
And we'll see you in our next episode of Two Pastors
Pastors in a
Pod.